When we started Boat Life, we got lots of questions from our friends who visited asking how they would charge phones whilst being on the boat. We told them and ourselves that we simply had electricity on board and there's absolutely nothing to worry about.
Oh, did you see it?
And yes, if you only want to charge your phone, there are simple ways to do that.
Is it charging?
Yeah. But if we're talking modern day liveaboards, there's more to consider than a USB plug. Making modern life at sea possible involves lots of electric solutions. We are not where we want to be yet, but we want to show you our off-grid solutions that enable us to be about 90% self-sufficient. And then there are these new battery solutions that change what's possible on 36 foot or any boat size for that matter. It's a whole new category of product and we're so excited to have received a unit from EcoFlow to review and use. And we use it almost daily. We are going to split this topic into 2 videos. So in this video, we show you how we're wired.
Get it?
And how a modern life is possible on 12 volts. And in the follow-up video, we show you how the Delta power station fits into our setup. So before we get into any more detail, it is important to understand that on a boat you usually have 2 different kinds of circuits. On our boat we have a 12 volt DC circuit, which is the one that is connected to our batteries, and we have a 220 volt AC circuit, which is used whenever we have shore power and we are connected to the land. So currently we have 3 different ways of generating electricity when we are off-grid on anchor, and additionally we have a battery charger that we use when we are in the marina. Our first method of charging is through the engine. Just like in a car, the engine doesn't only power the drivetrain or the propeller, it also charges the batteries through something called the alternator. The alternator is simply a big dynamo that gives us about 30 amps, and if you run the engine for 1 hour, we receive a battery charge of 30 amp hours. If you wonder if that is a lot or a little, then just keep watching, we will explain that later. So the second way that we charge our batteries is right here. The second one is the wind generator, which is less loud than the engine, but still quite annoying. And it only works when there's lots of wind. So apart from the noise, we get about 4 amps when it's windy, and if it's windy for 1 hour, we will have received 4 amp hours of charge. In the current conditions, which is actually not that windy, you can still hear it, and it gives us between 1 and 1.5 amps. Our third way of generating electricity, and the primary one when we are on anchor, are the solar panels. We have one rigid one on our Daffit, which is 90 watts, and 3 times flexible ones, which are 100 watts each. And the quality of those panels really determines how much you get out of it. These are cheap and crappy, obviously, and this one's pretty high quality. So on a sunny day, we get about 5 to 7 amps out of 90 watts of this one, and more or less the same out of these ones. On a cloudy day we get about 2.5 amps, and in total maybe 5.
Like today?
Like today we probably get about 5 amps. We'll have a look in a minute.
Hello.
Oh, hello. The electricity that comes from the solar panels is approximately 20 volts. That is too much to directly put into the batteries to charge them, and that's why something like charge controllers exist. So charge controllers reduce that voltage down to 14 point something, so the batteries don't get destroyed and they get charged properly. You can put more than one charge controller on a battery bank, and that's what we have. One of them is for the rigid panel in combination with the wind generator, and the other one is the charge controller for the 3 times cheap flexible panels. And you can also read what we get right now. So this is 0.3, this is no charge from the wind, and when we flick over to the solar we get 2 amps right now from 90 watts on a cloudy day. Over here, that is the charge controller for the flexible panels, and these currently give us 4.847, almost 5 amps. There are massive differences in price. This charge controller is a so-called PWM charge controller, which is 30 bucks on Amazon or AliExpress or you name it. And this one, which is yet to be installed, is our great and pricey Victron, which is an MPPT charge controller, which basically means it is an optimized controller that takes more energy out of the solar. And this one is about 300 euros. The reason why we need to store electricity may seem obvious. We need to get through the night and cloudy days. Usually at night we are on anchor and the only light we use is the anchor light. Sometimes though we do night passages and we need electricity to run our instruments, the autopilot and the navigation lights. Wind might blow through the night and the wind gen could provide some energy if it worked, but we definitely only have usable sunlight for about 10 to 12 hours. So to store electricity we have battery banks.
We have in total 5 batteries, and 2 you will find here under the stairs. This one over here is our starter battery, which is just used to start the engine. And then this is one of our 4 domestic batteries or house bank batteries. We have 4 times 105 amp hours, which means we in total have 420, and they are very, very, very cheap lead acid batteries. This means that we can only get about half of the energy out of each battery, so this will give us about 200 amp hours of actual usable energy to power all of our devices. There are a lot of discussions about how low the voltage can drop on a battery before you break it, and I don't think anybody really knows, but we just keep as a rule of thumb that we don't really want to go below 12 volts, because that would probably not be so good for the really cheap ones. And I think this is actually what happened when we were back at home and we couldn't get back to the boat due to Corona, because they weren't charged, they were really low, and since then they have not been performing so well. So I think out of 200 amp hours that we were able to use last year, we can only use maybe like 100, 120, and then the voltage is just so low we are afraid to use a lot more.
So we also noticed that when the batteries are drained 50%, so lost all of their usable power, it is quite hard to get them up again, to let's say 75%. And at the same time, it is also very difficult to charge them from 90 to 100%. So there's kind of a sweet spot, but that is a bit too much detail for my taste, and I also don't really know more about it. So we're moving on to show you what is actually using electricity on the boat. This is the panel, and I'm going to show you whatever we have on there. So on the left side, these are all kinds of different lights that we have on the boat. The first one are navigation lights, which we use when we sail in the night. The mooring light is the anchor light, which is a white light on top of the mast when we are on anchor. The steaming light is a light that we use when we are under engine at night. The deck light is the light on deck. We switched all of our lights to LEDs, which take way less energy but are just as bright, and since then our lives have changed.
Significantly.
No, but honestly. So for example, our mooring light, so the anchor light on top of the mast, uses 10 watts as a normal light bulb, and this one is the equivalent, which uses, give me that,
1.68.
1.68. And that's a good price. Just switch the LEDs if you haven't. The cabin lights are like basically everything. That's the main circuit that powers all of the lights that you see here, over there, and actually all of the plugs that you find here, where we plug our devices in.
So like in your car, we also have these cigarette lighter plugs, and this is what we use to charge basically all of our devices, like our phones, our computers, our batteries for the camera. Most of it actually works through just USB plugs, which is really cool. And we just recently got these new plugs that we can just put in here. And this one has a USB and a USB-C. And this one actually has 2 USB-C, and we got the USB-C ones because we can charge our computers with this. And also because these plugs actually generate 30 watts. So that means it's a lot more than a normal USB plug like this one, which does 5 to 10 watts, which is enough for phones or to charge your camera batteries, for example, but for the computer it's just too little. So that's why we got these. And they are very pretty and very cool. We will link them down below in the description because they're really awesome. And with this we can actually charge our computers and edit without draining the battery of the computer. With the normal 5 to 10 watt plugs we can actually not do that. It will just drain the battery slowly, but it will still do that. So these three are actually new. We just installed it last week and we're very happy with it because now we can here charge 6 devices, and before we could only charge 2 devices through our other plug. So we upgraded from 2 to 8, and this is going to make life a lot easier.
So in the introduction I said modern life at sea, and maybe that's what I mean with it, because usually, or like years ago, you charged your phone through a normal plug in the wall. You charged your computer with like a big transformator. I remember those Dell things. That kind of changed in recent years, and most of our devices charge with USB-C, some of them still with micro USB, but it's just so much more efficient to charge devices from a DC system to a DC system, because every battery powered device is DC. So there's no need to invert power up to 220 volt AC and then invert it again into a charging current for the battery. When you're inverting from DC to AC to DC again, you lose a lot of energy, and this just doesn't happen anymore, so that's a huge plus. Next to phones and computers, even the marine industry caught up, and if you buy a new VHF, then I'd suggest you make sure that you also get a USB charging one, because this is so much more easy. We can plug it into our normal cables. We don't have to carry this bulky 12 volt car cable thing that just works for one device. It's kind of cool. So over here we have the water pump and the bilge pump, and the water pump system is actually quite sophisticated and deserves a whole video for itself. But without electricity we cannot pump water from our water tanks into our running water system. That includes the kitchen and the bathroom. Oh hey, we have a shower over here, and also a cockpit shower outside, which is sometimes used as an outside dishwashing and showering place.
Feels good. The water feels like it's gonna be nice. It's not that cold, I think.
All of that crazy out of this world technology is hidden under our saloon accommodation, and this is what it looks like. There are quite some other pumps in there too. One is the bilge pump, so whenever we have water in the boat that is below these floorboards, then the bilge pump will pump that out. And another one is a shower drain pump. And because the bathroom floor is below the water line, there's no way to get that water out of the bathroom floor if there's no pump involved. So in order to get the water out of the bathroom, which lands over here, we have a little switch that turns on that pump and pumps the water away. So without any electricity, we are royally fucked.
So one of the most important devices on this boat is, of course, our fridge, which costs about 1,000 euros. And unfortunately for that price, you don't get like a fancy fridge with an ice machine and everything. No, you just get a tiny compressor and a cooling plate, and that's it. And probably because it's 12 volts and because there are not a lot of people offering this product, it is that expensive. Apart from that, it takes about 5 amps to run. You can imagine that if it runs 24 hours a day, 24 times 5 is 120. Ooh, that fast. So that also means that almost our entire battery bank is used just to power the fridge.
And another important one is the VHF one, together with a car radio. And this one and that one, they go together. That's like the central navigation unit, the chart plotter, and the wind instruments. This instrument shows us where the wind is coming from and how strong it is. And this instrument shows us faulty speed, faulty temperature, but accurate depth, which is really useful. And the autopilot that helps us steer if we don't feel like it. This is where we control our autopilot, we can set a course and put it on auto, and a compass and a computer will calculate the rudder position, and a motor and a hydraulic ram on the rudder will then move the rudder on course. Recently we installed an active AIS which will send our position over VHF, and we are visualized on the chart plotters so we can be seen by cargo ships and other boats. This is our plotter. You probably know that view because we show that in the video quite often. So here we go. Over there in the marina we get quite some boats, or all the other ones in the Bay of Gibraltar. On the 220 volt AC circuit that only works when we are plugged into shore power, we have 3 switches. One is for the water heater. We have hot water either when we turn that one on or when the heat of the engine heats up our water. The second one is the battery charger that feeds into the 12 volt circuit, and the last one is the one for the 220 volt sockets. We have 4 of those, 1 in each cabin and 1 in the saloon. This is where you would plug your regular plugs in. We have 220 volt sockets in each of the cabins and 1 in the saloon. The newer boats, they have quite a bit more of those in the galley and in the heads, but our boat is from 2001 and we are quite happy that it actually has sockets in the first place. So in the back cabin, they're just next to the light switch, and this is where we charge our toothbrush and like batteries for tools. The one on port side we use for our electric water cooker, and with an extension cable we go to our induction plate over there. The one in the saloon is actually just above the main panel over there. And then we have one in the V-berth just on top here. In the beginning, when we didn't know anything about boats, we actually thought that as soon as the engine runs, the alternator would somehow power some device that magically makes all the sockets work, which is usually not the case. You'd have to like buy these inverters that are installed in your system to make that work. But instead of doing that for $1,000, I guess, we just bought a cheap inverter from Home Depot and attached that on the batteries themselves, and with a little like an extension cable we can just pull that out and use 230 volts through an inverter that's attached to the batteries in case we don't have shore power. We don't like to use the cheap inverter. It starts to randomly beep and it gets quite hot, and some delicate devices don't even work on it. So for a few weeks already we've been using this portable power generator which contains a lithium battery. If you want to know how that one fits into our existing setup, then make sure to watch our next video.
And if you don't want to miss out on that video, then subscribe, hit that bell notification so you will be notified when the video comes online somewhere in the coming week.
Thanks for watching this one, and see you soon. I hope you learned something today. Okay, bye bye.